Good evening, friends. Welcome to the Career Shifts podcast. This is The Journey to the Future, a podcast where we explore the world of work, leadership, and innovation, how it's being redefined one bold shift at a time. Now, here's the number that should make you pause: over 1,700. That's the number of GCCs or Global Capability Centers currently operating in India. Collectively, these centers employ more than 1.9 million professionals and generate approximately $64.6 billion dollars in revenue as of FY 2024. But here's the thing: this isn't a scale story, this is a strategy story. It's about how India became the epicenter of enterprise reinvention. And very few people have had the front seat row to this transformation, quite like our guest today, Mr. Lalit Ahuja. He's a former naval officer, a serial entrepreneur, and today the CEO of ANSR or ANSA, the firm behind more than 100 plus GCCs across India. He didn't just witness the GCC revolution, he helped shape it. If you are in an enterprise leadership position, global strategy, HR, tech, or curious just to know about how the world of work is being built behind the scenes, this one is for you. So let's dive in. Lalit, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you, Gopal. Yeah, doing really well.
Wonderful. Lalit, as I said before we started this, this was my way of giving back to the community of people who, read stories and listen to perspectives. And we are going through an extremely interesting, unique time when it comes to there is growth on one side of what we are doing through GCCs, but at the same time, AI is also disrupting the world of work. It is leading to a lot of professionals confused as well, reflective, and I think hearing from voices like you always helps gain more perspectives about what they could do in their career. And the word career shifts came from a perspective of transitions that have become so normal in times like these compared to in the past, where people would just, like my mom and my dad were career loyalists to their companies. My mom was in railways for 37 years. My dad was in an automotive company for 42 years. And here I am probably in my 10th role and in a founder entrepreneur avatar where trying to, do things differently. So that's the purpose with which I started this. So it's indeed a pleasure to have you here. Before we start, the conversation around the question, I have a few questions that I would definitely want to ask, but any thoughts that you have, any opening thoughts that you want to share?
No, I think excited to be here and looking forward to, adding to the stories that, you've been propagating in the market.
Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. So Lalit, this is about career shifts. And you have had a very interesting journey yourself, the kind of career that you had in the past to what you do today. For the audience who may not have had the opportunity to listen to that side of the story, if you could just take a few minutes to share about that, that would really help.
Yeah, no, I talk about, maybe career lives. Some part of it is, the greed of, trying to put as much in a life as possible. Went to BITS Pilani, ended up, with a short stint in commercial flying before joining the Navy. I did about 11 years in the Navy. And Navy itself is, presented a set of very diversified opportunities, spent almost 6.5 years on warships, built possibly one of the most sophisticated computing capabilities in India in the form of Naval, Computer Applications Center, and of course had some headquarters stints. And interestingly, also was the ADC Chief of Staff to Prime Minister of Mauritius. So much you can do in, the one sort of career with the Navy. Came out, joined a company called Datamatics and became the CEO eventually. So pioneering days in IT outsourcing industry. I'm talking early 90s, when we had to sell, the fact that India had electricity and we lived in homes and there was clean water to drink. So that was the state of the union those days. From Datamatics, moved to LG Electronics. I was the first CEO for LG, got LG to India, and it was a big career shift from IT to manufacturing, supply chain, building a brand of a company that wasn't known in India. In fact, we came into India as Lucky Gold Star, and somewhere along the journey, we transitioned to the LG brand, but in the process also ended up setting up the R&D center of LG, what today we would call as a GCC. So my first exposure to GCC was way back in 1997, when it was driven more by the necessity of a company like LG, dealing with DNA surgery and building capabilities that just couldn't find in Korea, and of course the DNA that LG needed to transform into a software powerhouse. From LG, I moved on to News Corporation. I worked with Rupert Murdoch for the longest period of time. Had many stints, including the CEO of Star TV, ran a fund for Rupert, but also did a string of GCCs for several news companies like 20th Century Fox and Fox, Dow Jones, NDS. So been through this journey, much before, obviously, again, GCCs became mainstream as an industry. Left News Corporation, and then, of course, joined Target to run Target in India, and then finally, of course, Answer. So, hard to write a resume, and no two jobs have been very similar, but that's the journey of my life.
Wonderful, incredible. And I have heard about you when I was with Target. I think I joined just as you left. So we probably missed each other at that point of time, but a lot of stories about the kind of work that used to happen when you were around. And then, of course, Navneet took over. And I think, today's Target is very different than what it used to be, but I'm sure it's just grown leaps and folds in India, and also kind of created kind of a success story that started being spoken about, written about a lot more, and led to a lot of other US retailers come in. So if you were to really, reflect, I think LG is something that you said, but what was that one moment that you saw a potential for a GCC become more than just the cost centers that we used to be? Like, I started my job in a similar equation, but what was so different when you were looking at it from your lens?
I think it was a combination of purpose, contextually empowered employees, and of course, big problems to solve, right? So the idea was, how can you put all of this together and ultimately get magic on the other side? The genesis of LG GCC, LG R&D Center, way back in mid-90s, was the fact that LG and consumer electronics industry was entering into the convergent era. I think there was a realization that a washing machine and a microwave will be more software than hardware, and there just wasn't the DNA and people to do that. And the industry that existed in the form of the IT industry was not designed to serve the kind of mandates that were coming from companies like LG. So the solution was, what can be done in terms of putting together great people and giving them the opportunities to solve big problems. And that's how it all got started, right? So the early inspirations and motivations came from companies like LG and News Corp, where a lot of impossible was done just with the power of talent and conviction.
Yeah. No, I think it is extremely important. And I do realize that there are things that we do differently when it comes to GCCs, or even as we used to call captives in the past. and the whole passion and the purpose quotient was always higher. So completely relate with you on that. Now, Lalit, all these numbers, which is like 1,700 plus GCCs, $65 billion in revenue. But the truth about growth journey is a lot beyond headlines, and a lot of times people may not really empathize with what goes behind some of the times. If you could walk the audience through what typical challenges that organizations face in whatever is not visible to the audience, I think it would be a great one to reflect
Yeah.
upon.
So I guess there is no one size fit all kind of an approach, each one to their own in terms of the specific problems and challenges that they're trying to resolve, which ultimately results in some form of a GCC. But what is core and foundational is obviously talent, right? Getting people with certain skills and proficiency that are either not available in home location, or a company by virtue of how it's constituted, organized, does not have the ability to hire the right kind of talent. I mean, imagine
Yeah.
a restaurant company that runs a GCC in India trying to hire cloud engineers or AI engineers. Not going to happen. So I guess it's a manifestation of DNA that a company has, its ability to host some newer job families. A more important problem is to drive change and transformation, because sometimes change and transformation can be profound and can derail organizations. So, GCCs are a nice solution to remote that change and deal with obviously the fact that you get the work done without, shaking up or disrupting the organization. But end of the day, it is about accelerating the journey of business and technology transformation, and to stay relevant as a company. Uh, there is another, I would say, newfound reason, which is technology has changed very rapidly over the past, I would say, 5 years in particular, with so many new paradigms becoming mainstream. So it's hard to keep pace with the paradigm shifts, and therefore, when you need that accelerator, GCC can become, that accelerator. So it's a combination of purpose, it's a combination of people, it's a combination of capability, capacity to ultimately get work done that, is the most important need for any organization.
Thank you for that perspective. You spoke about people and talent. India has been known for being a talent hub for the world for a long time now. But something has inherently changed in the last 5 years, if I were to say that, right? I mean, one hand, there is AI that is disrupting everything that we do. And on the other hand, there is also, I also represent academia here a bit because I also am a professor of practice in IBS Mumbai. And the curriculum that we need to be able to bring some of these realities to life is kind of not at matching the pace at which things have to. In current situation, if you were to look at audiences who could be in their 20s to 40s, there is a bit of a challenge in their heads about what should they be doing to remain relevant. And the focus is the word relevance. One, what is your view of talent in India as it stands today? Two, what could be some things that people can do to remain relevant? Those would be my two questions.
So I'll talk about talent in the context of GCCs, assuming that, that is the thread, which is going along. So the notion of talent in the context of GCCs is evolving very rapidly. It's a more holistic, four-dimensional kind of a perspective that's becoming mainstream.
Sure.
Clearly, you need the skills and proficiency to do certain kind of job, but you need a very high bar from a skills and proficiency perspective, because the work that GCCs do is fairly complex, and therefore you require higher order of skills and proficiency. The second is to effectively integrate with the organization. You got to be culturally compatible with the organization. You got to be one of the kind, otherwise, you're going to be a misfit and you'll not be successful. Because a lot of it is not as much about what gets done, it's about what gets done.
Yeah.
So that is an important part of the consideration. GCCs ultimately also represent a talent pool that ultimately will be future global leaders for organizations. So therefore, matching or conforming to the leadership dimensions of a particular organization is an equally important consideration. And finally, the ability of people to stand up, as part of the organization, manage stakeholders, have a point of view, influence without authority, get the work done, drive and influence business outcomes is extremely important. You're just not writing a piece of code. You are ultimately taking accountability for, what happens on the other side of the code, right? So I think the view of talent now is around enterprise talent in very simple terms. It's the same bar, it's the same playbook that companies are using to hire similar kind of talent that will be successful, within an organization. And obviously there's a challenge over here, because the talent, whether it's coming from academic institutions or from the large services industry that is a feeder to the GCC talent pool, obviously did not sort of build a pool, that would be culturally compatible. There wasn't focus on leadership. There was no focus on certain attributes in terms of getting the work done and driving business outcomes. It was all about being a good programmer and, writing so many lines of code. And that's how productivity was measured, right? So I guess this is a journey we are going through. There is obviously an increasing realization that if you have to be successful in a GCC, you got to be a very different kind of talent. In fact, the lines between talent of different kinds, if you're a startup or if you work in a startup, it's a whole different set of attributes that matter. If you work in the services industry, there's a different word out there. And if you have to be successful in a GCC, you're working in an enterprise, right? So we spoke about Target. If you are working for Target's GCC, you're working for Target. The expectations are no different from anybody in Minneapolis or any other part of the world, right? And you've been through that experience. And that's, I guess, both the opportunity and challenge. When we come out on the other side of mitigating this talent issue, we would be a very different industry, a very different community, a very different country, right? With some really smart, people who would be obviously powering, these GCCs. Now, in terms of how people should think about, their careers, specifically when it comes to, the opportunities that GCCs, present. I spoke about one aspect, not just being good in your job, but, obviously thinking about joining a company versus joining an IT services or a BPO company. So that's one mindset you got to bring. The other is the fact that technology is moving very, very rapidly. True. So what you learned in your college and what you did in your early part of your career is not going to be good enough, right? And, there's an extreme worst case, you may be just replaced by, AI. Yeah. So I guess, the sense of urgency, the sense of understanding the landscape, making, clear career choices, and therefore, arming, resourcing, educating yourself is going to be a very, very important consideration. The world is moving much faster than how people are able to develop themselves. So you just got to move at the speed of change. Otherwise, you would cease to exist.
Yeah, very well said. And I think my two takeaways would be that we need to adapt fast and, of course, be aware about what are the requirements and attributes that one needs to think about and conform to, if I can say that, for the GCC space. And I hope people listening into this would take cognizance of that. You mentioned about AI, Lalit, and AI has been a big shift in the last few years, if I may say so. Is leading to a lot of innovation, leading to a lot of disruption, leading to a lot of questions in heads about whether am I losing the edge over things, even at the coding level or even at the engineering level. One, how are GCCs adapting to this AI revolution from your perspective, and anything that needs to be changed as part of the growth story?
Yeah. So, I go back to the whole DNA, the paucity of certain kinds of skills specifically for traditional companies in their home locations as the starting point. I guess AI is real, AI is here. In many cases, it's still a solution in search of a problem, but we know AI is inevitable, and it's only a question of time before it becomes mainstream across the host of different, functional areas, right? The consequences would, sit on a spectrum where one end of the spectrum would be, certain jobs, certain functions would completely be eliminated. And rightfully so, because there is no human intelligence at play and there is no human value add for many of these functions. They're very routine, they're very transactional. In fact, AI can do a much better job, because there'll be a lot more consistency that AI would bring into certain, routine jobs. To other end of the spectrum, where there would be unprecedented opportunities for productivity, for efficiency, for innovation, for transformation, for speed to market. So we'll see all those benefits coming in through the whole AI spectrum. And GCCs are now beginning to become powerhouses, as far as enterprise AI adoption is concerned, right? I mean, everybody wants to be abreast with where AI is going, and it's hard to find people and dollars in the home locations, but you can easily do this in GCCs because there is talent available at reasonable cost, and there are obviously big problems to be solved. So GCCs are becoming crucibles and hotbeds of AI innovation for enterprises. I think there is also a desire to control the AI destiny. It's not something that companies want to outsource and have somebody else, manage the insights and the intelligence that will come from their proprietary data. At some point, this will be a lot more foundational to enterprises. So therefore, this is one area where there's a lot of internal, AI imperatives that are ongoing. So effectively, a few things are happening in the GCCs as we speak, and this world is changing very rapidly. A lot of GCCs are investing in SWOT teams and capabilities to identify enterprise use cases for adoption of AI. Where can AI make what kind of an impact? So, those sandbox environments for experimentation is happening at scale. The second is as and when the use cases get identified and validated, you have the whole AI infrastructure which essentially results in creating enterprise-grade AI production capabilities that is being executed at the GCCs. The third, which is an interesting concept, is this whole notion of digital talent. And of course, now you can have contextually and culturally compatible digital AI that can do certain kind of work without any or with minimal human intervention, right?
Yeah.
Other than this, of course, a lot of AI at the forefront of the digital transformation, whether it is the online omni-channel capabilities for different industries, areas like improving, personalization, efficacy of some of the online platforms, conversion, customer intimacy. A lot of that is, at play. So there is, I would say, and we have a fairly large portfolio now of about 170 odd companies. I would say 70% of the companies have maybe more than 70 or 80% of all of enterprise AI sitting in their GCCs. Right?
Wow.
It's
Incredible.
humongous. And we have just gotten started. So, obviously at some sort of an inflection point, and it's moving, obviously it's catching up like wildfire.
Yeah.
Every day there is something exciting that is being rolled out. So I guess GCCs will not get impacted as profoundly as some of the services industry, and that's because GCCs do, human intelligent work, or work that
Yes.
requires human intelligence that includes putting AI to work, right? You ultimately need a human being to
Yeah.
put AI to work. So I think GCCs will be, the net beneficiaries of what comes
Yeah.
out on the other side.
Yeah. No, thank you. And I think I kind of agree with you in terms of the work that is happening in some of the GCCs. I didn't know about the 70% number, which is incredible. Often when we talk about GCCs or services organizations today, one of the topic that is an extremely sensitive yet important topic, often underspoken about. And when I say leadership, it also results into two problems. One is the competency and capability of themselves, like what value do they bring into the organization, and how are they nurturing talent as well. What are your views on the state of affairs of talent, leadership talent in GCCs? And two, is something inherently different that GCCs need to work towards their leadership that perhaps a manufacturing or a services organization do not really need to? Or is it like it's common across? What would your views about that be?
No, so I think GCC leadership talent is very different from the leadership talent that obviously exists in services industry. In very simple ways, think about joining a services company as a leader and joining a company as a leader, right? The
Sure.
expectations, the job description, the role description is entirely different.
Different.
But
Yeah.
as a leader, you obviously need to understand and conform to the leadership expectations of a company. In general, the focus is a lot on team development. The focus is on driving results. The focus is on having a point of view, managing stakeholders. The focus is on influencing without authority. A lot of times you do work and manage with a set of stakeholders where the lines get blurred in terms of how the reporting relationships work. So the expectations are very different, and the adaptability and the versatility that is needed to move from one function to the other for effectively navigating the career path is also very, very important. So I guess as I said, just reiterating that you're joining a company, you're joining the business or as a functional leader, and it goes by the rules of a particular company or an industry rather than obviously the services industry where typically there's a consistent set of expectations of managing delivery and customer expectations.
Wonderful. And I completely relate to it. I having worked in both services as well as GCC environment, completely see the difference in which the leaders in an organization like Target operate versus some of the other services organization.
Mm-hmm.
I want to shift focus to a bit more sensitive yet important topic, which is policies. Now, GCCs are a result of constant upgradation of policies, both at the center and the state. And it requires a lot of changes in the way we do things, the approvals come through. Like, remember the days of STPI and SEZs to what it is catering to the clientele like a GCC organization. If we were to talk about tier one cities like Bangalore, Delhi, Gurgaon, Hyderabad, I think they're doing well, will continue to grow further as well. But at the state level, there is a desire to do a lot more of that in tier two cities as well, or tier three cities as well, so that there is a better, management of ecosystem of talent as well. What are your views on how much of work is being done well in some of the places where you have been, working? And what should a state policy machinery do differently to be able to make it more lucrative for GCC organizations?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a little longish answer because there's so many things are interconnected here. Let me start with GCCs and national agenda, right? So we're looking at GCCs being almost 1.2, 1.3% of India's GDP, with obviously a potential to become 3%, 3.5% of GDP by 2047. So when we talk about Viksit Bharat, GCCs are now, looked at as one of the key pillars for the Viksit Bharat strategy. Much of it, has to do with the fact that GCCs are bringing in, high quality investment, creating very high quality jobs, and are leading to, sustained social and economic development of the communities where, GCCs exist and thrive. So I think there is a realization at central and state level that GCCs can become, critical, economic pillars. But end of the day, I mean, there are certain things that have made the 6 locations, as we know, the tier 1 locations work. Obviously, availability of talent is the most important consideration, but there are other factors like the existence of social infrastructure, the connectivity, safety and security, availability of high quality real estate, hotels. You'll have a lot of travel, between, some of the host countries and where the GCCs are going to be located. Yeah. And, you got to make it easy for these people to travel in a very safe and secure and a comfortable manner, right? So this is obviously a journey that cities like Bangalore and Hyderabad and Chennai and NCR have gone through over the years. And I guess, there are some shortcuts and some late mover advantage that tier 2, tier 3 cities have. But you have to go through the process of, building a more holistic infrastructure, people, social infrastructure, residential places, schools, colleges, and GCCs typically work with more lateral and experienced talent. So, you need an environment where mid-level senior people, would want to move to and stay. And I guess there's a growing realization that all of this needs to be done. And many state governments have already announced their GCC policies and have embarked on a set of initiatives to create that long-term infrastructure and capabilities to eventually attract, global companies and make GCCs foundational to their, economic development strategy. So there's work ahead. We, of course, know that the tier one cities are saturated. They're very competitive. Costs are going up. It's only a question of time before tier two, tier three cities see some, benefits of, the whole uh, industrial GCC industrial growth. But there's work to be done from a policy and infrastructure perspective.
I'm sure. I mean, I think I was in Ahmedabad for a couple of years, working with IIM Ahmedabad, setting up their school of public policy. And often, though beautiful city, I love everything that is there about that city in terms of food and infrastructure, there was still a lot of reluctance for organizations to grow, and Gift City was one of the answers that they could think of, and I think it's doing its job well. But we need a lot more realization across cities and GCC policies that are conducive. So very well said, Lalit. If I were to, reflect, come back to you now. You started Answer a few years ago. If you had to redo that, in a new GCC avatar format or new format, how would it be? If you can ask that.
Actually, I keep getting asked this question, and I tell people I wouldn't do anything different because we got an opportunity to start this industry and start this business with Target, and there can be no better ideal customer than Target, right? In some ways.
Yeah.
So, I mean, everything that you would expect, was there, right? The leadership, sponsorship, and advocacy, the importance of culture, talent development, the right work coming in, the right operating model. You're not subservient or an outpost or a back office. You are the future of Target. The positioning of the GCC as Target in India, so everything, right? I mean, in fact, at 170, I tell a whole lot of people, we've not found the second Target, right? I mean, that's a big reality. You have companies that check 90% of the boxes, but not 100% of the boxes
100%.
that Target did check. So, in many ways, I mean, Target was not only instrumental in how Answer got started and, the great work that we've done over the years, but, Target has also influenced the broader GCC industry. I mean, we today talk about paradigm, seat on the table, integral part of the organization, doing, work which is transformative, disruptive. I mean, Target did that in 2005, right?
Yeah.
So what companies are aspiring to do in 20 years later,
2025,
long time back. So I mean, very cliched answer, but it's the journey has been to obviously do a lot more targets, and the lessons from a company like Target in terms of what we could have done more faster, are some of the things that obviously I would do differently.
Well said. If there is one thing, one legacy word that you would want to leave for people who would listen to this, what would that be?
I mean, I would talk about maybe conviction in some ways. In terms of when Answer was starting its journey and the headwinds and the fact that we were doing something that had the power to disrupt and shake up the broader industry. So I guess two parts to what I was going to say.
Sure.
That comes from this whole notion of conviction, and then what it takes to carry your conviction through, because it comes with everything that one would not expect in an entrepreneurial journey. One, you're going against the grain and you're trying to do things that is disruptive, is new to the market. And because it is disruptive to a much larger industry, which was the industry, which was the market, obviously a lot of efforts to, obviously kill the momentum, which we had
Yes.
to, you know, to bear in so many different ways, right? They were individually for us, for our customers, and of course for the company, right? I mean, how can a company like Target, or for that matter, Wells Fargo Bank or General Mills or Time, many of the companies that we did in quick succession, would have to sort of listen from the market. This is going to fail.
Yeah.
People are going to leave. These costs are going to shoot up. You'll not be able to, do some good work. So this was,
Yeah.
obviously one part of the story. And the second was, how do you gather that momentum to make it mainstream? I mean, you started off talking about 1,700 GCCs. You started talking about
Yes.
65 billion in revenues. You started talking about, 1,900 or 1.9 million people working in
Yeah.
the industry, right? So that's been the journey. I would say, I mean, I can describe it in many different words, but the whole conviction that something like this can be done and needs to go all the way is what I would sort of leave behind.
Wonderful. Lalit, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you taking this time to share, your experiences, the journey of the whole GCC revolution, if I can call that. If there is anything that you would want the audience to keep in mind as they brace up for the years to come, any parting thoughts that you would have?
End of the beginning. It's the journey is just started. There's been
Mm.
some phenomenal amount of work that has been done over the past 2 decades, but I guess for the best is yet to come. Okay, the market is mature. There's very high degree of acceptability, and some of the best companies will come in their best avatars, bringing in the best jobs, the best problems, and the best challenges. And then on top of that, we have AI that will help us in unprecedented ways to raise the bar and move the
Yeah.
needle and get stuff done that is literally unthinkable. So I'm very excited about what lies ahead, right? And as I said, it's even better days ahead for all of us.
Very well said. Thank you, Lalit. Really
Thank you.
appreciate not just for the insight, but for the clarity. We didn't just talk about GCCs today. We spoke about ambition. We spoke about conviction. We spoke about how to scale, but also be mindful about the chaos that may be around it. And what does it take for you to be a leader, a professional as part of the GCC? It takes discipline to build something enduring, especially when the world chases what's flashy. You reminded us that the transformation doesn't begin always in boardrooms. It begins with design, with belief, with the conviction, and with the decision to build capacity before it chases the outcomes. To everyone tuning in, watching, listening, this episode wasn't about GCCs alone. It was about the ecosystem, an ecosystem of how we should think, of placing talent, trust, and time at the center of your growth playbook. And maybe the real future of work won't be defined by technology alone. It will be shaped by those who know how to orchestrate complexity and lead without losing themselves to speed. If something in this conversation nudged you, sit with it. It will give you a language, something that you have been sensing about, and please do share it with others if you think you found value in this conversation. We'll be back with more stories, more builders, more brave questions. Until then, stay future ready, stay thoughtful, stay with us. This is Career Shifts Podcast, Journey to the Future. Thank you.
Thank you.